Hello and welcome to another Persevere and Motivate video. Yes, you can see me in the corner of the screen. I know, it's weird. I need to make a confession. In my previous video, we started doing a lot of macro-based building. And what you're seeing here looks kind of similar, doesn't it? Sort of. Well, firstly, we've got a class called main, and in here we've got build types function. Everything seems normal, right? But when you start scrolling down, you're gonna look at something and you're gonna be like, hang on a minute, what's all this? What's all this? So, to cut a long story short, basically, I hit a roadblock when doing the initialization macro context for generating the system.db.object class representing the database object for the server side. Now that roadblock involved basically when defining the type to actually generate static functions within that type in order to create new objects of that type, etc. And the compiler needed to know the type beforehand before you could start using that type, because otherwise it would come up with an error saying, well, what does this mean? And there were a lot of issues. I started getting weird XML nonsense being spewed out from the compiler, basically describing all the basic types in the compiler. It's just like, what does this mean? So there was a lot of issues going on with that. And so my temporary solution, at least for the time being, is to just generate the code as is in the context of some kind of tool, and to generate physical files in both the client and the server side. Now, this is a very cheap way of doing things. I mean, it's not wrong per se, but it's a very cheap way of doing it. I mean, the macro contexting was good for a time until I hit that roadblock and I couldn't figure it out. And my major mistake through all of this nonsense was actually deleting the parser.hx files. So I'm just going to have to look at my video again and just try to copy as much of that as possible, put it to one side and just don't touch it until I figure out a solution. When I'll do that, I have no idea. But this video isn't actually about looking at this generated code. I mean, all it's doing is it's generating this code, for example. So we've got class test data, which extends this object. It's generated all these variables. It's generated this function toDef. It's generated this static function modify, and it's doing all this stuff, right? Now, I know this works because I've done this kind of stuff before. You'll probably notice that this looks kind of like something you would use in a REST API, which is exactly what it's about. It's about using a REST API. So I will still be using this tool. This will be especially useful for both the C# WinForms application that we'll move on to in a moment. But what we will also do is use it for actually building a website, which will eventually revolve around a vacancy template website. So I want to move into Visual Studio, and let's have a look at what we've got currently in here. when it eventually loads. Of course, I am recording, so it's probably going to be a bit slower. So I've been working on this for quite a while now, as you can probably imagine. I want to show you a few things. So let's launch from the launcher and start. So you'll find that over here we've got quite a lot of things going on, but I'll explain all that in a minute. So we've got this P&M launcher here. So we've got profile. Obviously we're not technically logged in because there's no user management system in here yet. This is just sort of the basic foundations of the application so far. We've got my tasks, open tasks. So the whole idea behind this business management tool is it revolves primarily around tasks. Whatever activity that you do within any module, whether it's human resources, IT, there will be other modules to come as well. When you go into this application, what you'll find is there will be open tasks. So those are tasks that haven't been assigned yet, that have been either automatically generated by the application itself or the system, whatever you want to call it, or it was created by, say, your manager. So your manager creates a task and then someone is assigned that task. Either someone picks up that task themselves or the manager assigns the relevant person to that task. And it would appear either in open tasks or my tasks. So the whole premise behind this business management solution is it revolves almost primarily around tasks. It's almost always tasks. Now, each of the modules have different, obviously, features, let's say, for lack of a better word. So in here, what we've got is departments, roles, and employees, as you can imagine. I mean, this is human resources at the end of the day. Roles and employees don't exist yet, but let's take a look at the departments. Oh, that's a good thing. I haven't actually enabled or launched WAMP. That might be a good idea. That's interesting. Why did it work? Why did that work? Huh. Hang on a minute. Am I missing something? Am I missing something? I must have forgotten to complete this yesterday. That's just typical, isn't it? That is just typical. Pretend this didn't happen, okay? Pretend this didn't happen. So, here. Pretend this did not happen. Build. Launch. Okay. Okay. So we've got human resources here, right? That didn't happen. That didn't happen. So we've got human resources here. We can create a new department, right? There's nothing appearing here. We click on that, and we've got this section with title, description. You just create your title and description. I'm going to delete that because we don't want that. So this is the basic premise. Now what you'll find is that we've got different projects here. So we've got launch HR, we've got launch planning. That's something that I was thinking of doing, I'm not sure yet. And our main launcher. So you saw our main launcher. We've also got this launch HR, and what is happening is when we click on one of these, let's say this one, we're starting a process, launchhr.exe. So what I do is when I build these applications, it's copying the debug files over to the relevant folder so that the launcher can pick this up. and then it's passing in a command line argument called department. So what that means is if we try to build it directly from, or launch it directly from here, for example, let's just go in here and try launching, say, HR.exe, it will say you cannot launch P&M human resources directly. And this is part of the security mechanism that will eventually be put in place to prevent hackers from just accessing each module manually. So it prevents people from accessing applications but without having been logged in. Now, currently that's not how it stands at the moment. You can sort of work around that by going in here, and I think you can create a shortcut. Let's just try it. So let's say we create a shortcut, right? We go to properties, and then we say, I think it's /k, and then department. And if we try launching it, I can't remember, but basically there is a way around that, and you can just access it. But eventually what we'll have is some kind of session variable which will be equal to the session ID generated by perhaps a GUID or GUI, whatever you want to call it, and that would be based on user login ID. So it would look up the user's login ID when you pass in the session, generated by logging in, and then it would determine, based on that session ID, load access privileges for that particular module, etc., etc. So it's sort of it's module based, and that's the approach that I'm taking, and it should, in theory, be fairly secure, at least from a remote access point of view. So you can't just remotely access and expect things to work. So that's the idea behind that. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm showing you this code. Well, main reason being is because I just enjoy creating videos on this kind of stuff. I used to enjoy creating video tutorials a long time ago. I used to have a YouTube channel called Color Multimedia Enterprises. I lost the credentials to that account frickin' ages ago, which is the reason why I've got this new channel now, and obviously my main channel, which is Luke Salmon Books and Studios, which is more to do with video tutorials, although I'm not really doing much on that channel at the moment. I'm thinking of moving most of my video tutorial content onto this channel here, Persevere and Motivate, and the Luke Salmon Books and Studios will be more of a personal blog kind of thing. So, without delving too much into the in-depth nonsense and rantings of what's going on with these channels, I'm gonna actually go ahead and explain further what all of these are doing. So we've got here GUI forms, DBM and Common. So Common is shared between pretty much all of the modules. So Launch HR, Launch Planning, Launcher. The common.dll will contain all of the database objects. So this relies on DBM. DBM has this class, DBObject, which is a class that I've created myself, and it is pretty much what you would expect. It is kind of like the model in the MVC approach for websites, and it basically grants you the ability to reference database tables and get the values accordingly. So we have things like search, for example. So you can search based on the given database object type. It obviously has to be a DB object, otherwise it will just return null. You can pass in a string filter. Obviously, no, you are right. You're going to immediately say that is very insecure. Yes, it is. I am well aware of that. This is definitely not production ready, which is the reason why I haven't released anything regarding this yet. So don't worry, this will change. Why don't I just use a database management library that currently exists? Well, this uses MySQL. Who uses MySQL with C# and WinForms these days? You know, and also who uses WinForms, right? I mean, the only reason I'm using it is because I'm used to it for 13 years, and it's just an environment that I'm most familiar with, which is the reason why I'm using it to develop this software. And C# again is a language that I've been using for a hell of a long time now, so it's just one of those things, right? You just can't get away from it. Nature of the beast, as they say. But this is what this is doing. So you can search, given a specific type, where you want to get things based on a certain filter, right? You've got a mass delete function, so you can delete based on a certain criteria. You've got delete here, so that's in reference to a specific instance. Yeah, so going down then, we've got update, so that's obviously update the current instance, or update given, again, certain criteria. I think I actually added this as part of a REST API example that I was creating for myself at one point, so there's a bit of a change there. Insert and selects a specific ID and then fills all the member variables accordingly. We've also got this column info, get columns info, so that's getting the column name, type, default. And this can be useful for things like getting things like the length of the column, and get DB type, column type. So this is again figuring out the type that exists in the database table itself. You know, I mean, this is still technically in development. There's a lot going on in this library. It doesn't look like much, but there is definitely a lot going on here. And eventually what I'd like to start doing is adding more options, so it's not just limited to MySQL. It's also got things like Oracle database, Microsoft database, etc. So this is going to be a complete library, and I'm going to fully open source it when it's done and I feel it is production ready. Down here we've also got GUI forms. Now this is part of the actual modules here themselves. So the main bulk of this is here, form builder. And the idea behind this is to simplify the form building process, as you can imagine. So what you saw earlier, if we go back in here, if we go to here and we select new department, right, all of this stuff in here is generated by form builder. It automatically generates these labels, the text boxes, depending on what you type. So if we go out of here and close that, and then we go to our new departments form, where is it? There. We've got our form builder. We're referencing this form right here. And then we say, well, we want to begin submit. So what that means is it's going to, as it says in tooltip there, creates a container that encapsulates a submit form UI for a given type. The type is PM department. We initialize our type here. we set some default values and then we insert it into the database. Okay, and then we pass that in. So we actually have to have an existing instance of that type already there. We also begin a section, that was that general section that you saw, and within that section we want to add a text box and a multi-line referencing these values, title and description. What's that referencing? It's referencing this inside here, title, description. If, say, for example, it's because obviously these variables are limited to specific values, so you can't add a space, for example. That would be a compiler error. So there's also an option to use a display value, and that would be used for the label. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? There's quite a lot going on here. Now, this is just experimental at this stage. It isn't fully complete. Now, this department section is kind of pretty much complete in a way. So I kind of want to move on from this now and actually start building on this, which is the roles section. This is the main bulk of the human resources module, revolving around building roles, getting candidates in, interviewing those candidates and getting the candidates onto the roles, and managing your training manuals and all of these different aspects. So this is the main bulk of the human resources department, as you can imagine. So there is definitely a lot going on here. But before I go ahead and do that, I'm going to just pause this video for the time being, because it is getting on to almost 25 minutes, and I don't want these videos to be too long. So I hope you enjoyed. In the next video, we will in fact go into the role section and we will develop from there. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and hope to see you again soon.